whānau, welcome back to episode 3 of the Paul and Henry Show. Really good to have you here. Just a bit of a reminder, at the end of this recording, we're going to post the link if you want to give us any feedback. And thank you very much to everyone who's already given us feedback. It's all been positive, which is great. And if you've got any ideas or suggestions about what you'd like to hear us talk about, please let us know. A wee reminder too that this is our third episode. The first episode we did was around natural justice, and we talked about the bias rule and the hearing rule and this concept of being fair as a regulator. And in the second one we talked about good decision making. I really suggest that you watch those two before you watch this one. You'll probably get a lot more out of this one if you've got those in your back pocket. So today we're going to talk about record keeping. Probably not the most exciting subject, so we'll try and keep it a little bit interesting for you. You got any comments on that, Henry, at all?
Record keeping and the legal obligations around record keeping is one of my nerd topics. So yeah, hold your in suspense, everyone, for when I get to talk about the important role of the Chief Archivist and the Public Records Act.
Right, I'm looking forward to that one. Okay, so I always say work on the basis that one day someone's going to investigate your work. So everything you do might one day come under challenge. It might be investigated. And that could happen in a whole range of different forums. It could be a person who's challenging a decision that you've made in a civil setting. It could be happening in a criminal setting. It could be a complaint to the Privacy Commissioner, a complaint to the Ombudsman. There's a whole different, you've probably got a few more you can throw in there, but there's a whole different ways that your work could come under the scrutiny. It could even be by the media or the public generally, couldn't it, around something you've done?
Yep.
So on the basis that one day someone's going to investigate your work, it's super important that you keep really, really good records. That just makes sense. None of us have got superhuman memories. We can't remember, what we did last week in infinite detail, let alone remember what happened 2 or 3 years ago when these things might eventually make their way into a forum where they're being challenged and every little single detail is getting pulled apart. The other reason that we've got to take good records is that we need to be evidence-based. Now that's in Tuaku Tamaya. That's a pretty fundamental part of being a good regulator. My view on what it means to be evidence-based is that for everything we do or say, our actions, our assertions, every kind of claim that we make, we've got some evidence to support it. It's not just, hey, we think this is a cool idea. You often hear people go, we've got to stop this operating, it's really dodgy. It's really dodgy. And then you go, okay, well, where's the evidence? Oh, well, better go get some, and then when you start digging around, you find actually that they're not dodgy. It was just that it's kind of a rumour that's perpetuated around the organisation or even in the industry, So there's different types of records. Before I get into those, did you want to add any comments?
Yeah, just to say, keeping good records supports good decision making.
Yeah.
It ties in with what we're saying in the previous episode, which is even when you might make some inquiries, do some work that doesn't really lead anywhere, you still need to keep good records for the reasons Paul spoke of. But particularly when we end up making a decision, your work is part of that decision, and we need a record of your work to support decision makers. If it's escalated or if the decision is challenged, you can go back to your notes to support an appeal. You might need to end up writing an affidavit about what you did, and that's really easy when you've got good records.
It is. So what makes records good records? I've got some little tips. I guess the first thing I'll comment on is that old school records were kept in a notebook, not like this one because it's got a binder that you can rip the pages out. Police, very particular, your notebook has to be something that you can prove there's nothing been removed, there's no overwriting or no one's tampered with it. But we've kind of moved on a bit from just having a paper notebook. I still personally really like it. So now there's lots of different ways that we make records. We make records on our phone when we take a photograph of something, when we send a text message. We can do it in emails. We can do it on a voice recorder. We could film something. We could make electronic notes in an iPad that get filed inside of a system somewhere. There's a million different ways to do that. So there's some pretty good rules around the types of records or the way that you should keep your records. But I think it's important to understand the fundamental principle behind all of that is the integrity of the document. So one day you have to be able to, you might have to sit in a courtroom somewhere in 3 years' time and go, these are the notes that I made at the time, and I can hand on heart say that they've been stored in a way where they haven't been tampered with. No one's added anything to it. Nothing's been removed from it. I tell you a little war story. I had a case once where there was about 3,500 emails became one of my bulk of exhibits. And I know it's not that funny. And 3,500 emails, excuse me. And the people that we were going to court with said that somewhere they had seen an email in amongst all that said, "We'll get this bitch."
Yeah.
You know, and I was thinking, no one I know would have actually put that in an email, but the allegation was there. But the way that all these emails had been filed meant that we could hand on heart say every single email that's ever been part of this history has been filed in this file.
Yep.
And I can tell you there are 3,529 emails. Yep. Not a single email is missing. And then I had the job of reading them all, and my evidence was, here's the emails. They're all here.
Yep.
Everything's been stored this way. Nothing's missing. Here's the electronic kind of metadata that shows that.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, Your Honour, I've read every single email, and those words don't appear anywhere.
Yeah, and actually having a good system that everyone follows is the best method we have to prove a negative.
Yes.
So to prove a negative, like we never received the payment or that conversation never happened, the only way we can really prove that is to say, because every time we receive money, we follow this process, or everyone working on the file was filing their emails here, and there's no record of it. And if everyone who was working on it can say, hand on heart, yep, I followed that system, I filed there, I followed those protocols, and there's no record, then that's the best method we have to prove a negative. So definitely agree with that.
You've got to be able to prove, these are all the records, there's nothing missing, and whether you do that in the paper notebook or you do it in an electronic filing system, it doesn't matter. We've got Info Hub here at Waka Kotahi. I really like it. I know everyone, well, actually, I've never seen a filing system that everyone's really liked, but I like Info Hub because it gives it that integrity. You can look at the audit trail. You can see who's accessed it. You can restrict that stuff.
And we've got Casey, and we've got a whole lot of other systems that people can make notes on. And actually, in terms of the integrity of documents, keeping electronic records can be better because we've got the metadata. We can see who's accessed and edited them over time. And if you are taking paper notes, you'll know when you've taken a paper note and at the end of it you think, actually, this is important. My advice is scan that in, save the scan into Info Hub or wherever, and then you can just throw out the original. Because then there's even less arguments about tampering with it later, because you say, no, look, I took the note on the 12th, I scanned it in on the 14th, and it's been in our system ever since.
I agree with everything you said, Henry, except I probably would never throw out the original, but that's just an old school habit of, hey, in case the electronic system fails, I've still got the original. So my notes, I'm just going to read from my notes that I made before this. What makes records good records is, you've got to be able to find them. But we keep heaps of records in our emails, and you ask me to go and find some, I'm going to spend half the day trying to find it, So you've got to set up whatever system you're using, whatever file you're running, make sure you can actually find the record that you're looking for, and have a naming convention that makes sense in 3 years' time when you've forgotten what your naming convention was about. So, anyone should be able to look at that naming convention and go, I want a document around audit reports. Oh, here it is. It's in the file called audit reports. So have a naming convention, have them in a place where you can find them. It's really good if the source of the document is known. So if I go out and see an operator and they give me some documents and I take those and I record them and I save them, if it's not apparent from the document where it's come from, I should make a note of where I got it from. Otherwise, you might be looking at some documents in 2 or 3 years' time going, I don't know, I've got these, I remember I got them from someone, but I don't know where I got them from. And then those things can be questioned and challenged. Yeah.
So if somebody gives you something, you can write on it or put a cover note on it, received on this date from this person at this place, scan that all in as one PDF and save it down, for example, and then you open that PDF, you can see where it's come from and what's in the pack.
So you've got that whole kind of... We'll talk about the chain of custody when we talk about evidence and exhibits, but that's what you're starting to prove, the integrity of those documents. The other thing about good records is they've got to be complete and they've got to be detailed. And I think, you've got some stories about how you should record things.
Yeah.
And I'll let you explain that.
Yeah. So if I just fast forward to what's going to happen to your records. So you might get a Privacy Act request from the person that you're talking about, and there are some things we can withhold under the Privacy Act, but not a lot. So it's best to assume that if it's about them, they can see it. If it's to do with an active investigation, we can withhold it, until the appropriate time in the criminal or civil process. But eventually, they'll probably see it. We could get an Official Information Act request, and we've got good withholding grounds for genuinely sensitive information, but not good withholding grounds when we're just a bit loose with our language and our words. But the other thing is, if we end up in court, there's a process called discovery, where each side gets to discover the other's documents. And that's what your story of your 3,500 emails. So people will trawl through all of the emails and other records and screen them for legal advice and a few other things, but not much gets screened out, and then they swap over. So if you talk about your colleagues behind their back in emails or use unflattering nicknames for your colleagues or the regulated parties, that will come out in court. And I've got lots of war stories about people on the witness stand having to explain that when they use this really unflattering nickname in an email, they're referring to their boss.
It's not funny, is it? It's kind of funny, but you don't want to be that person.
No. And also, we have to be careful about what we write. So a simple example would be, you've spoken with a regulated party, you've had a really frustrating conversation, and you might write down an email, it was a really frustrating conversation. They were drunk. They might see that later on and be really offended by that because they weren't drunk. And you don't know that they were drunk. Write down what actually happened, which is their speech was slurred, they seemed incoherent, it was really difficult to understand them.
They were shouting.
All of that stuff. Yeah. That's relevant context and important information. Don't leap to conclusions or use kind of shortcuts like they were drunk. Yeah, or even they were abusive. But if you can be a bit more specific, that's much more helpful. So that's what I think we mean by complete records.
Yeah.
Detailed and complete and accurate, and keep it factual. You can go from the facts to inferences, but don't jump to the inferences. Write down the facts first, which is speech was slurred, didn't make sense, they were a bit shouty, maybe they have a substance abuse issue, there's something going on here. Yeah.
And that all comes down to that, the integrity and your integrity when you've got to sit in the hot seat and explain why you've said the things you've said or you've done the things you've done.
Yeah.
And it's really, really easy to make someone look stupid if you've given them the start of an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So you make a flippant comment in an email, they can just start to chip away at your integrity.
Yeah. And like we said in the video about natural justice, if I'm a lawyer for some other party, I'm going to try and twist those words.
100%.
And, those comments like they were drunk, you were just out to get my client from the beginning, weren't you? You never really gave them a fair chance, did you?
Yeah.
Whereas,
yeah,
I think we've made the point.
So be professional in what you say.
Yeah.
Make complete records, be able to find them. Be mindful of if it's an electronic document, here's what I have to do. If it's a paper document, here's what I have to do. But that underlying thing of one day, I have to be able to stand up and go, I made these records this way, and here's why I did it that way.
But I just want to be really clear. If it's important, you can write it down. Don't feel like because of all of these processes, you have to keep things out of written material. We need to have difficult conversations. We need to write down difficult things. All I'm saying is think about your language and how it could be read by others when you're writing that down. But, we've got good withholding grounds when we need them. So don't hold back, because it just makes it hard for everyone to do their job if we don't keep good records and complete records. So I don't want to gag anyone, just make sure you're mindful of what you're writing down.
Yeah, and
in particular, if you're really worried about something and you think you need legal advice, emails to the legal team will be protected.
Yeah.
Emails to your colleagues where you talk about legal stuff, probably not, but emails to the legal team will be protected. So particularly in that context, when you're getting legal advice, you can definitely say whatever is on your mind.
Yep. Can I make a quick comment on that? We're going to talk about legal privilege in a whole different episode.
Yes.
But just because you copy Henry in on the email doesn't mean you've got legal privilege.
No.
Seems to be a bit of a trick. I'll copy legal in and I'll be okay. I won't have to discuss. No.
Yeah.
So work on that basis that one day all of your records are going to get disclosed. If you work on that basis, you're fine. You made the comment about don't be shy about writing things down. I've seen people get in really good record keeping practices and then they want to have a conversation but they don't want it recorded, so they don't write it down. But the other party's written something down and it looks dodgy. It's like, hey, you've kept really good notes, but you didn't for this conversation here. Well, why not?
Yeah.
How do you answer that question?
Yeah. Although, sometimes you don't quite know what you want to say. You're struggling to find the words to express yourself. And in that situation, it's fine to call up a colleague and have a chat, and you can kind of think out loud, say things and then take them back and disagree with yourself. Then after that conversation, write it down. Hey, Paul, as we just discussed just now, this is what we think's going on. Yeah. This is what we think the next steps are, and just fire that off.
Yeah.
That is a good way to, if you're worried about, sending that email that you later regret, have a conversation about it to help organise your thoughts and what you actually want to say. But then write it down, because as you say, if you then have all of these sort of off-the-record conversations that never get written down,
or they're off the record, but they're actually in emails, and it's email chat with 8 people in a group, and someone chucks in the comments that you don't want. They're part of that chain, and you've got to disclose that stuff. Okay, we'll probably wrap this up, mate. Is there anything final comments? Yeah, just a couple final things. Really simple tip to your point about naming conventions. Change the subject lines of emails. Particularly an email comes in from someone, my license or query or complaint, and then that might turn into a big long email chain. When you first reply, just think about changing the subject to, their name or their license number, whatever the file is, whatever it is, and then that helps with filing and filing stuff later. And the final point I wanted to make was about the Public Records Act. Ooh. If you follow the advice in this video, you will comply with the Public Records Act. But the other thing is at the end of it all, there is a important constitutional figure called the Chief Archivist, whose job it is to make sure we keep good records in the first place and how we destroy records, and that we're not destroying records when we shouldn't be. And if we want to destroy records, we can get permission and that's fine, or we hand them over to Archives New Zealand and then they go into the archives. But just to make the point that there is another watchdog out there over our shoulders, making sure that we comply. So keeping us honest. And it's a really important part of the system that we shouldn't take for granted. So just on that point, sorry, we could talk about this stuff for hours, can we? But the really common one for destroying documents is I finish with my notebook. It doesn't go in the blue bin. This is actually an official record that has to be kept for 7 years. Yeah. So keep it, store it. Yeah. We should have a process here at Waka Kotahi. I'm not sure about that, but I keep all mine in my locker and I've got them there. So.
And if that's too much for you because you don't like notebooks and paper, then don't use them. Go electronic, which is what I do, and then it's all, and save it correctly, and then it's all sweet.
Cool. All right, so summarise, we don't have superhuman memories. Work on the basis that one day someone is going to investigate your work. You're going to have to be able to prove, have an evidence base for the decisions you've made or the actions you've taken or not taken. And the best way to do that is to keep really good records. So you need to know how to find them. They've got to have the right naming conventions. They've got to be in a system that ensures their integrity or have a process that ensures their integrity. They've got to be complete and detailed and professional, I think is the big word there, eh?
Yep.
Brilliant.
Have fun out there.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. We're going to be talking about
evidence.
My favourite subject. Thanks, everyone. Ka kite anō.